It had been years, decades in fact, since Voyager 2 left Earth behind, making its journey into the vast unknown of deep space. Launched in 1977, it was the furthest human-made object from Earth. The mission was simple enough: to study the outer planets, take a glimpse of the solar system's boundaries, and send back data. But as time passed, expectations had lowered. Voyager 2 had become just a distant reminder of humanity's pioneering spirit, an almost forgotten relic traveling in the dark void, taking its last breaths. But then, something changed. A signal, faint and almost imperceptible, broke the silence of space. It wasn't the regular data stream that scientists expected to receive, nor was it an anomaly that could be easily explained away by cosmic interference. This was different. This was deliberate. The first sign came from the Deep Space Network, where the signal was received with the clarity of something intentional. Scientists were baffled. It wasn't just the usual pinging from the spacecraft's instruments. The message that arrived was structured, a clear pattern of information being sent, like a language, but not one they could recognize. Months passed, and teams across the globe worked tirelessly to decode the message. But there was a deeper question that no one dared ask out loud. What if this message wasn't meant for us? What if Voyager 2, so far from our world, had found something or someone? And what if that message was not from our universe? It started with the simple observation of a strange data signature. The normal cosmic radio waves, background noise that space explorers are used to, had been replaced by something intricate, like a set of coordinates mapped out on a star chart. For some reason, this new message was different. No one could explain it, and no one could dismiss it. It had to be decoded. But as the data continued to flow in, something unnerving became clear. The signal didn't make sense. The patterns were erratic, but in a way that wasn't random, as if they were being sent intentionally, crafted with a purpose. Who or what was speaking? In the heart of the research labs, an eerie silence settled as the data streams were fed into the computer, attempting to decode the message. Scientists worked around the clock, but the puzzle pieces just wouldn't fit. The language didn't match anything in the human lexicon. It wasn't a code from Earth. It wasn't something even their most advanced algorithms could comprehend. It felt foreign. One scientist, standing in front of the monitor, stared at the screen, heart pounding. The last message was clear. It was not from our universe. The implications were beyond comprehension. Was Voyager 2 transmitting a message from another dimension? From a parallel universe? The very thought was enough to rattle the nerves of even the most seasoned researchers. But there was no denying it. The message was out there, and it was waiting for us to listen. As the message slowly began to make sense in bits and pieces, the haunting question loomed large. Were we ready for this? Were we prepared for the truth that Voyager 2, in its silence, had discovered something humanity was never meant to find? Something that wasn't of this world. The mystery had only just begun. The countdown had started, and the truth would soon come to light. But for now, one thing was clear. The universe was no longer the same, and neither were we. As the weeks passed, the signal from Voyager 2 continued to grow stronger and more coherent, though its full meaning remained elusive. The scientific community was captivated, but a palpable tension hung in the air. No one knew whether this was an extraordinary breakthrough or something far more dangerous. The initial attempts to decode the signal had yielded only fragments, but one thing became clear. The structure of the message was unlike anything they had encountered before. It wasn't a random sequence of numbers or noise, but a complex, deliberate algorithm. Every scientist and engineer working on the project had their own theory, but they all agreed on one thing. This was no ordinary signal. Dr. Amanda Fisher, one of the lead researchers, worked tirelessly to analyze the data. She had been focused on a hypothesis suggesting that the signal might be coming from a different physical dimension, one that didn't obey the laws of physics as we understood them. After days of running simulations, she began to notice something peculiar in the data, a set of coordinates. These coordinates didn't match any known location in our solar system or beyond. They were far outside the Milky Way. But the coordinates formed a map of sorts, pointing to an uncharted region, possibly a universe beyond our own. The more Fisher studied, the more her theory expanded to include the concept of multiverses, parallel universes with their own physical laws and possibly their own life forms. Fisher shared her findings with the team, and disbelief washed over them. This wasn't just a message from another galaxy. It was a potential communication from another universe altogether. How could they begin to comprehend the implications of this? What could this mean for humanity? As the team discussed their options, the uncertainty was palpable. Should they attempt to respond to the message? Could they risk interacting with whatever or whoever was out there? The responsibility of their discovery weighed heavily on them. What they had found was no longer a curiosity. It was a dangerous unknown with implications beyond their understanding. "We can't just ignore this," Dr. Fisher said, her voice full of conviction. "This discovery is bigger than us. We have a responsibility to explore it." But despite the urgency, unease spread among the team. The realization was sinking in. Voyager 2 had been traveling for over 40 years, and now it had found something, or someone, from beyond our known universe. This wasn't the first encounter with alien life that humanity had dreamed of. It was something far more profound, something that could alter everything we knew. "Do we really want to know what's out there?" asked Paul Henson, one of the engineers. The question echoed in everyone's minds. There was no clear answer. The signal was more than just noise. It was a message from somewhere beyond, and now the team had to decide how far they were willing to go. The stakes were higher than ever, and the choice was clear. This was no longer just a scientific anomaly. It was a message, a call from beyond the known universe, and it was waiting for them to respond. As the hours passed, the team worked tirelessly, analyzing the data from Voyager 2, each step revealing more and more about the mysterious signal. But with every new discovery, the weight of the situation grew heavier. The question of what to do with this knowledge loomed larger. Was this simply a scientific breakthrough, or was it a potential threat? Something humanity wasn't prepared to understand. Dr. Fisher's team had decoded a portion of the message, and the coordinates they had uncovered pointed to a place beyond our galaxy. A place where the laws of physics as we knew them may not apply. What had started as an exciting mystery was now being viewed with growing suspicion. No one on the team could agree on the next steps. Everyone felt the same pull of curiosity, but there was also a creeping sense of dread. "I don't think we fully understand the implications of what we found," said Dr. Harris, a physicist on the team. His voice was filled with concern as he paced the room. "This isn't just a message from another planet. This could be from another universe, one with completely different laws of reality. We might be opening a door to something that we can't control." But we can't ignore it, Dr. Fisher countered, her tone firm. This is an unprecedented discovery. We've been given a glimpse into a reality we never thought possible. The universe could be full of these unknown realms, and this might just be the first step in understanding them. We have a responsibility to explore it. Daniels, the team's communications expert, stood quietly in the background, his thoughts clearly at odds with both of his colleagues. He'd always believed in exploring the unknown, but this felt different. What if we open a door we can't close? Daniels finally spoke up, breaking the silence. His voice was quieter than usual, tinged with uncertainty. We don't know what kind of intelligence or entities could be behind this signal. We've never even considered the possibility of encountering something from outside of our universe. If we respond, what happens next? The room fell into silence again, as Daniel's words echoed in everyone's mind. The tension between curiosity and fear was palpable. The truth was, no one knew what would happen if they responded, and yet, the urge to know more, to uncover the secrets of the message, was undeniable. I don't think we're dealing with a threat, Dr. Fisher said, her voice steady. We're not receiving a warning, we're receiving an invitation. This message has structure, it's deliberate, and it's asking us to look deeper. I believe this could be the key to unlocking our understanding of the universe. But at what cost? Dr. Harris interjected. What happens if this is a trap? What if the message is designed to lure us into something we're not prepared for? As the debate raged on, the weight of the decision began to sink in. Each scientist understood the importance of the discovery, but in the end, there was no consensus. The team remained divided, some eager to explore the message and what it could mean, while others feared the consequences of making contact with something so alien, so far beyond their comprehension. For now, the decision would have to wait, but the clock was ticking. The message was clear, and it was waiting for them to respond. The room felt thick with indecision. The team had been discussing the implications of the message from Voyager 2 for hours, but no one had yet made a decision. The moment of action was fast approaching, and the weight of the choice was undeniable. Dr. Fisher stood at the head of the table, staring at the large screen that displayed the decoded message. The coordinates were clear. A map to an uncharted area beyond the Milky Way, in a universe far different from our own. What lay beyond? What would humanity face if they responded? There has to be a response, Dr. Fisher said, breaking the silence. This could be the most important event in human history. The question isn't if we should respond, it's whether we're ready for what comes next. Her words hung in the air, but they were undeniably true. Every person in the room understood the magnitude of this discovery. Voyager 2 had sent back more than a signal. It had opened a doorway to something greater, but the unknowns were overwhelming. How could they possibly understand what they were dealing with? I'm not sure we're prepared for this, Daniel said, his voice low but firm. Reaching out to something from another universe. What if it's a mistake? What if we awaken something we can't control? His words resonated with the others. The fear of the unknown was palpable. Humanity had never been so close to contact with an intelligence so alien. Every instinct screamed to proceed with caution, but something deep within urged them forward. The potential of discovery was too great to ignore. Dr. Harris, who had been silent, finally spoke. What if this message is a gift? What if it's showing us a path forward, a new frontier? We've looked to the stars for centuries. This could be an opportunity to transcend our limitations. But what if it's a trap? Julia interjected, her voice shaking with concern. We don't know who or what sent this. What if it's manipulating us, pulling us into something we can't escape? Her words hit hard. The team collectively inhaled. They had all considered the dangers of making contact, but the pull of discovery was too strong to ignore. Could they afford to walk away from this moment? "We don't have the luxury of turning back now," Dr. Fisher said quietly, eyes fixed on the screen. "We've already opened the door. There's no going back. Our response will change everything." The silence that followed was thick with anticipation. The weight of the decision pressed on them. The time for debate was over. They could no longer stand on the edge of this abyss without taking the leap. "Then we respond," Dr. Fisher said, her voice resolute. "We don't know what will happen next, but we've been given a chance, a glimpse into something beyond our understanding. We can't ignore it." With that, the decision was made. The team would respond, to send a message back to whatever or whoever had reached out. What would that response unleash? Only time would tell. With the decision made, the atmosphere in the room shifted. There was no turning back now. The team had made their choice to respond. But as the words left Dr. Fisher's mouth, there was an undeniable tension in the air. What they had decided was monumental. It wasn't just a scientific breakthrough anymore. It was a potential turning point for humanity. Dr. Fisher gathered the team around the main console, her fingers poised over the keys. The digital screen was filled with intricate patterns of data, each line of code representing an effort to craft the perfect message, one that could safely convey humanity's presence, intelligence, and willingness to communicate without inadvertently threatening whatever or whoever was on the other end. "Let's make sure we get it right," Dr. Fisher said, her voice calm but firm. The team worked quickly but cautiously, each of them contributing their expertise to ensure the message was as clear and neutral as possible. It was a calculated risk. No one knew if the response would be welcomed or provoke a hostile reaction. But there was no way to know unless they took the step. "I think it's ready," Dr. Harris said, stepping back from the console, his voice tight with anticipation. "We're sending out the signal. It's happening." Julia looked at the screen, her eyes scanning the final message that would soon be broadcast into the vast unknown. It was simple. A series of prime numbers followed by a basic pattern of geometry. A universal language designed to express intelligence. It's as simple as we can make it, but it speaks to them. Whoever they are, this is a signal of life. Daniels, still uneasy, stood to the side, watching the final preparations. What if they can't understand? What if this is all for nothing? "We can't think that way," Dr. Fisher responded, her eyes locking with his. "We have to believe that they'll understand. They reached out to us. We're doing the same. This is a dialogue, and dialogue takes trust." The console buzzed as the transmission was initiated. The signal began to pulse, traveling outward into the void of space at the speed of light. As the system sent the message, the room grew eerily quiet. It was as if the team were holding their collective breath, waiting for something to happen. Would there be a response? Would they receive any sign of life? Or was this just another step into the abyss of space, lost forever? Seconds felt like hours. The tension was thick, almost suffocating. Each of them knew the potential consequences of this message, but none of them could predict the outcome. Was this the beginning of a new era for humanity? Or had they just taken the first step into something far darker than they had ever anticipated? "We've sent it," Dr. Fisher said quietly. "Now we wait." The message had been sent, and now there was nothing left to do but wait and see if the message would be received and if it would be answered. The team stood, their minds swirling with questions, their hearts heavy with the weight of their decision. The tension in mission control was palpable. thick with anticipation as the team awaited a response. Hours passed since the message had been sent, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Every second felt heavier than the last. The outside world felt distant, as if time itself was moving slower. No one spoke, each person lost in their own thoughts, caught between excitement and fear. Dr. Fisher sat motionless at the main console, her eyes glued to the screen. Her hands trembled slightly, hovering over the keyboard, ready to react at any moment. Each time she glanced at the clock, it seemed to mock her with its relentless ticking. She knew the response could take days, maybe longer, but the uncertainty was unbearable. "We might not hear anything today," Daniel said, breaking the silence. His voice was low, resigned. He stood near the back of the room, arms folded, trying to look calm, but the tension in his eyes betrayed him. "It could take days, weeks, who knows?" "I know," Dr. Fisher replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But we need to be ready." The message had been sent. They had done everything they could, but now the universe was in charge. The unknown was out there, and they were at its mercy. What if it was a mistake to reach out? What if it led to something they couldn't control? Suddenly, the silence was broken by a soft, urgent beep from the console. Dr. Fisher's hand shot out, her fingers trembling as she quickly accessed the incoming signal. Her breath caught in her throat. The data was coming through, fast and strong. It was a response. "It's them," Dr. Fisher whispered, eyes wide in disbelief. The screen displayed a series of complex patterns, far more intricate than anything they had ever expected. The coordinates from Voyager 2's message had been met with a response. Clear, structured, and beyond their comprehension. These symbols weren't numbers or simple patterns. They were shifting, evolving in real time. They were unlike anything they had ever encountered. It was as if the message was alive, reacting, constantly changing in response to their own transmission. "This is incredible," Dr. Fisher said, her voice quivering with excitement. "It's not just a message, it's interactive. They're trying to communicate with us." Julia stepped closer, her breath catching as she stared at the screen. "But we can't understand it. How do we even begin to decipher it?" Dr. Fisher nodded slowly, still transfixed by the screen. "We don't have to. This is more than just a message. It's using the same universal principles. Mathematics, geometry, energy. Far more advanced." Daniel stepped forward, his face uncertain. "We have to be careful. We don't know who or what sent this. What if it's dangerous?" "I know," Dr. Fisher replied softly, "but we've already opened the door. We have to decide if we're going to step through or turn away." The team stood frozen, aware that they had crossed the line. The message from beyond the stars was not just a scientific anomaly. It was an invitation, or a challenge. And now the question wasn't whether they should respond, but what would happen if they did. The message from the distant universe continued to evolve on the screen, and the air in the room thickened with anticipation. The response was unlike anything the team had ever encountered. What had started as simple symbols and coordinates now appeared as something far greater, an interactive exchange that felt more like a conversation than a simple signal. Dr. Fisher's pulse quickened as she watched the symbols on the screen shift and change. Every scientist in the room felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a message from an unknown civilization. It was an invitation to something far more profound. The complexity of the response overwhelmed them. But there was also a sense of awe that could not be denied. They were no longer looking at mere data. They were witnessing the beginning of a profound encounter. "What if we don't understand what's on the other side?" Daniel's voice broke through the silence, tinged with unease. He had stepped back from the console, arms crossed tightly in front of him. What if we're not prepared? I don't know what's on the other side, Dr. Fisher replied, her voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling in the room. But we've already crossed that threshold. There's no turning back now. This could change everything. The patterns on the screen continued to shift, more complex and deliberate than before. The symbols seemed to be responding to the energy of their message, evolving in real time. It was clear that the response was active, that whoever, or whatever, was communicating with them was aware of their presence and was engaging directly with their signal. But the question remained, how and why? We can't just sit here and watch it, Julia said, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. We need to figure out what it means. We need to act. What if it's a trap? Paul, one of the engineers, asked, his face pale with concern. What if they're trying to manipulate us? A heavy silence fell over the room. Paul's fear echoed in every one of their minds. The unknown could be dangerous, and the team knew they were on the brink of something unprecedented. Was this a genuine invitation? A test? Or something more sinister? The idea that humanity could be communicating with something beyond their understanding was as terrifying as it was exhilarating. We can't stop now, Dr. Fisher said, her voice firm despite the uncertainty. She was already working on the next set of simulations, opening new programs on the console. We've come this far. We can't turn away from this. The decision hung in the air, the weight of it palpable. Whatever came next, they had already crossed into uncharted territory. The team wasn't just communicating with another species. They were engaging with something much larger, something that could reshape everything they knew. I think we're past the point of no return, Dr. Fisher added. The universe is reaching out to us. We have to decide if we're ready to take that next step. The screen flickered once more, its light intensifying as the symbols continued to unfold. This was no ordinary signal. It was a challenge, a call to action. They had to respond. But the real question was whether they were ready to face whatever awaited them. With a determined glance at the screen, Dr. Fisher pressed the button, sending humanity's first response into the unknown. The room fell silent, awaiting the next step in this unprecedented journey. The room seemed to hold its breath as the seconds ticked by. Every eye in the control room was locked on the screen, waiting for the next signal, the next step in this unprecedented exchange. The tension was unbearable, the silence deafening. The team had sent their response to the mysterious message from the depths of space, and now they were left to wait for whatever came next. Dr. Fisher's fingers hovered over the controls, her entire body still and focused. She knew that whatever came next would change everything. This wasn't just another discovery. It was a moment that could redefine the very essence of humanity's existence in the universe. She had spent her entire career looking for signs of life beyond Earth. But this was something beyond her wildest dreams, or her darkest fears. I can't believe this is happening, Julia murmured, her voice barely audible, filled with awe and disbelief. She stood next to Dr. Fisher, her eyes fixed on the screen, as if she couldn't tear herself away from the moment. I know, Dr. Fisher replied, her voice steady despite the overwhelming weight of the situation. We've crossed into the unknown. There's no turning back. The symbols on the screen began to shift again, this time at a faster pace, growing more complex, as if responding to their message. It was a sequence that defied explanation, a pattern of energy and information that didn't belong in any language known to humanity. But it was familiar, almost instinctual in the way it felt. It was as though the message was speaking directly to their minds, bypassing language altogether. And then it happened. The symbols began to form into shapes, structures, buildings, and landscapes that no one could have imagined. It was as if they were looking at an alien world unfolding before their eyes. The shapes twisted and contorted, moving in ways that broke the laws of physics as the team understood them. It was like a living, breathing landscape, constantly evolving. This is unbelievable, Paul said, his voice cracking with disbelief. He was standing near the back of the room, eyes wide, unable to process what he was seeing. It's like it's showing us its world, their world. But how? Dr. Fisher leaned in closer, her fingers now pressing against the screen, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. She knew this was no accident. This was a revelation, a message that wasn't just meant for them, but for humanity as a whole. The screen flickered again, and a new sequence of symbols appeared. This time, they weren't abstract shapes. They were figures, humanoid forms, moving with purpose. The team watched in awe as these beings interacted, communicating with each other in ways that were impossible to comprehend. But it was clear. They were intelligent. They were aware. "They're showing us themselves," Julia whispered, her voice barely a breath. "They want us to understand them," Dr. Fisher replied. "They want us to know that we're not alone." The screen continued to shift, new images appearing with each passing second. The message was becoming clearer, and yet the team was still left with so many questions. What did it all mean? What were these beings trying to communicate? And what did this mean for humanity's place in the universe? One thing was certain. This was just the beginning, and whatever came next, it was going to change everything. The images on the screen shifted, becoming more intricate with each passing second. Each new sequence brought them closer to understanding, but with each revelation, the gravity of the situation increased. The beings, structures, and landscapes presented before them all seemed to be pointing towards something. But what? What were they trying to tell humanity? Dr. Fisher leaned closer to the console, her mind racing. The world outside the control room felt like it was fading into insignificance. In this room, the future of humanity was unfolding. She felt the enormity of the discovery settle in. This wasn't just alien life or interdimensional communication. It was something far more profound. "This isn't just a message," she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. "It's an invitation." An invitation to what? The question lingered in the air, unanswered. The team had spent hours analyzing the data, but it was clear now. They weren't simply receiving information. The beings on the other side of the transmission were showing them something far greater than knowledge. They were offering a glimpse into something humanity could never have imagined. Julia stepped forward, her eyes scanning the evolving images on the screen. "But why us? Why now?" she asked, awe and disbelief in her voice. "Why have they chosen to communicate with us?" The question echoed in every team member's mind. They had always imagined that the discovery of alien life would be a momentous event, reshaping humanity's understanding of the universe. But this felt like something entirely different. "It's not about why," Dr. Fisher replied, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing in her mind. "It's about what we do with it. We've been given an opportunity. Now it's up to us to decide what comes next." Daniels, who had been quiet up until this point, spoke up. His voice was thick with the weight of the moment. "What if we're not ready? What if we're opening a door we can't close?" The room grew quiet as the team processed his words. No one knew what they were truly dealing with. They had been given an unprecedented opportunity to step beyond the boundaries of human understanding, but it came with an overwhelming responsibility. I don't know if we'll ever be ready for what's coming, Dr. Fisher said, her eyes still fixed on the screen. But I do know we can't ignore it. We can't turn away. This is the chance of a lifetime. A chance for humanity to evolve, to break free of its limitations. But what if it's too much? Paul asked, his voice trembling with fear. What if we can't control what's coming? What if it's beyond our understanding? Dr. Fisher paused, taking a steadying breath. That's the risk we're all taking. But what's the alternative? To let this opportunity slip away? To stay in the dark when we've been given a chance to step into the light? The silence that followed was thick with contemplation. The message from the unknown was clear. A call to action. The choice now lay with them. Would they retreat into the comfort of the known, or would they move forward into the vast unknown, ready to face whatever lay beyond? We have no choice, Dr. Fisher said firmly. We move forward, together. And with that, the decision was made. The team had chosen the unknown, ready to face whatever revelations awaited him, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. The room was charged with an electric tension as the team waited for the next transmission. The response from the distant universe had been overwhelming, and every second felt like an eternity. Dr. Fisher stood in front of the console, her eyes locked on the screen, her mind racing with the magnitude of the discovery. The air around them felt thick with anticipation as each team member silently processed the enormity of what they were experiencing. We've crossed into something we can't unsee, Daniels whispered, his voice taut with unease. Whatever this is, we can't go back. It's bigger than we ever imagined. Dr. Fisher nodded, her expression unreadable. There was no denying it. The message had opened a door, one that once passed through could never be closed. They weren't just receiving a signal anymore. They were engaged in a dialogue with something beyond human comprehension. But what would this engagement lead to? What would it mean? The screen flickered as the next phase of the message began. It was no longer just a transmission. It felt more like an invitation. The cryptic symbols began to form a clearer pattern. The message was alive, evolving in real time, responding to their communication. And with every new detail, the unsettling realization grew stronger. This wasn't just a message from an alien civilization. It was a presence, a consciousness reaching out in ways humanity had never encountered. Look at this, Julia said, her voice a mix of awe and hesitation. She pointed to the screen where the symbols were shifting, combining in a rhythm that seemed almost familiar. It's trying to speak to us. Dr. Fisher leaned forward, her eyes never leaving the screen. It's more than just communication. It's connection. We're being shown something far beyond what we can understand. As the team watched, the symbols on the screen evolved into something even more abstract. They weren't numbers or letters, but shapes that danced across the screen like a living organism, shifting and pulsing with each passing moment. It was as though the message transcended language itself, an attempt to communicate in ways that words or symbols could not capture. We're not just observing anymore, Paul said quietly, his voice full of quiet determination. We're becoming part of it. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The team wasn't simply decoding a message. They were becoming part of the very fabric of what was being communicated. It was no longer just an exchange of information. It was a merging of minds, a shared understanding of something profound. The symbols on the screen dissolved into light, and the room seemed to hum with energy. The walls, the air, everything around them felt alive. It was as if the message wasn't just something to interpret. It was a living, breathing entity waiting for them to act. Do we respond again? Julia asked, her voice trembling with the weight of the moment. We have to, Dr. Fisher said, her voice firm with resolve. We've opened this door and now we have to walk through it. The decision hung in the air as the team absorbed the gravity of what lay before them. The unknown was no longer distant. It was part of them. And in that moment, Dr. Fisher understood. This wasn't the beginning of a message. It was the beginning of a new chapter for humanity. The chapter they would write into the vast unknown. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of the console as the team waited. Dr. Fisher stood at the front, her eyes locked on the screen, watching as the symbols continued to shift and evolve. The air felt thick, charged with an energy they had never experienced before. The message they had sent had already been answered, but now they were faced with a decision: how to respond. "We've crossed a line," Daniel said, his voice low but steady. "We've opened a door we can't close, and we have no idea what's on the other side." Dr. Fisher didn't look away from the screen. She had never felt so alive. The possibilities, the unknowns, they all hung in the air like a storm ready to break. They had reached beyond their understanding, and now they were on the cusp of something far greater. "I know," she replied softly, "but it's too late to turn back. We can't undo what we've started." The symbols on the screen had transformed into a pattern that was far more intricate than anything they had seen before. They weren't just numbers or images anymore. They were a form of language that seemed to communicate on a deeper level, one that transcended all human understanding. "We have to answer them," Julia said, her voice filled with awe. "This isn't just some signal anymore. They're speaking to us, trying to communicate. We can't ignore this." "But what if we can't comprehend what they want?" Paul asked, his voice strained. "What if we make a mistake?" Dr. Fisher took a deep breath, her mind racing. She felt the weight of the decision, but there was no way forward except through. They had come this far, and they could no longer let fear stop them. "We don't know what they want, but we've been given a chance to find out. We can't hesitate now. The universe has reached out to us. It's up to us to respond." The team was silent, each person grappling with their own fears and doubts. This wasn't just a scientific discovery. It was a turning point in human history, and they were at the center of it all. The message they had received could hold the key to unlocking the mysteries of the universe, or it could lead them into the unknown, a place humanity had never been before. After a long pause, Dr. Fisher made her decision. "We respond. We continue the conversation. We don't know what will happen, but we can't let the fear of the unknown stop us from exploring what's out there." With her decision made, she turned to the console and began entering the necessary commands. The symbols on the screen began to shift once more, responding to their actions. The room grew heavier with anticipation, but the team was ready. They were about to take a step into the unknown, and they knew there was no going back. As the last of the coordinates were entered, Dr. Fisher looked up, meeting the eyes of her team. "This is it," she said quietly. "We've done everything we can. Now, it's up to them." The first response had been sent. What would the universe reply? Only time would tell. The response from the other universe had been sent, and now the room was filled with an uneasy silence. The team stood, eyes fixed on the screen, waiting for the next message. The initial wave of excitement had passed, replaced by the weight of the unknown. The screen flickered, and the symbols began to shift again, more rapidly now, responding to their reply. "We've opened a door," Daniel said quietly, as if speaking to himself, "and we don't know what's waiting on the other side." Dr. Fisher nodded, her eyes locked on the evolving symbols. The words that had once felt so alien were starting to take on a sense of familiarity. The shapes, the patterns, there was something almost rhythmic about them, as if they were alive, breathing, responding to their very presence. "Look at this," Julia said, stepping closer to the screen. "The symbols, they're aligning with something. It's like they're trying to show us something." Dr. Fisher's heart raced. She could feel it too, something deep within her, pulling her forward. The symbols were no longer random. They were purposeful, deliberate. They were telling a story they hadn't yet fully understood. The symbols on the screen began to settle into a pattern, and then, slowly, they began to form something that resembled a map. It was not of the stars or the galaxy they knew, but something else entirely. A new universe, perhaps? A different dimension? The coordinates were clear, and they weren't anywhere near the known universe. "We're not in our galaxy anymore," Paul said, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Fisher looked at the coordinates. There was no mistake. The message was coming from somewhere unimaginable, a place beyond their understanding. They had reached out, and now something or someone was reaching back. "It's a map," Dr. Fisher said, her voice steady despite the growing tension. "But it's not a map of space as we know it. These coordinates, they're leading us somewhere else." The room fell silent. The magnitude of the situation hit them all at once. This wasn't just a message from an alien civilization. This was something far greater, something that existed outside of the boundaries of space and time as they understood it. This was the revelation of a whole new realm, a reality beyond their own. "What do we do now?" Julia asked, her voice filled with a mix of wonder and fear. Dr. Fisher paused, her thoughts racing. She had never imagined anything like this. They were on the brink of something monumental, something that could change everything humanity had ever known. "We respond," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "We follow the map. We've been given a chance to explore the unknown, to venture into a place we can't even comprehend. But we can't let fear stop us. We have to go forward." The team exchanged looks, uncertainty and determination in their eyes. This was the point of no return. The road ahead was unknown, but the opportunity was too great to ignore. With that, Dr. Fisher pressed the button to send the next message, taking humanity's first step into a new reality. As the transmission sent, the screen flickered one last time. The room held its breath, waiting. What would they find on the other side? Only time would tell. The room was filled with the faint hum of the machinery as the team waited for a response to the latest transmission. It had been hours since the last message had been sent, and the anticipation was beginning to feel unbearable. Dr. Fisher stood at the console, her eyes fixed on the screen, willing it to flicker to life again. The silence felt too heavy, too oppressive. "I can't shake the feeling that we've crossed a line," Daniel said, his voice low but filled with concern. "We've done something irreversible. What if we're not prepared for what comes next?" Dr. Fisher didn't answer immediately. She was still focused on the screen, watching the data flow in, trying to discern any changes. The team was right to be apprehensive. The unknown stretched out before them, an infinite expanse they had no experience navigating. No one had expected the discoveries they had made, nor the responsibility that came with them. "We don't know what will happen," Dr. Fisher said finally, her voice calm but heavy with the weight of the moment. "But we can't turn back now. We've opened the door. The only way forward is through." Her words were met with silence. The fear and uncertainty hung in the air, but beneath that was a strange current of determination. The world had changed, and so had they. Their place in it was no longer so clear. They were no longer just scientists studying the cosmos. They were participants in something far grander, far more significant than anything they had ever dreamed. "I agree with Dr. Fisher," Julia said, breaking the silence. "We've been given something, an opportunity, a glimpse into the unknown. It's not something we can ignore. We have to keep moving forward. Whatever it is, we can't let it slip through our fingers." Daniels glanced over at her, still conflicted. "But what if we're not ready? What if it's too much? We're talking about a whole new reality, a different dimension." "I know," Dr. Fisher replied softly, "but the universe doesn't wait for us to catch up. If we wait too long, it might slip away. Whatever we're dealing with, it's bigger than all of us, and if we don't take the next step, we may never get another chance." A deep breath filled the room as everyone processed her words. The enormity of the situation was undeniable. They were on the precipice of something vast, a discovery that would alter the course of human history. But with that knowledge came the terrifying reality of what it might mean. Humanity was on the verge of being forever changed, whether they were ready or not. "I'm in," Paul said quietly, his voice steady despite the unease that still lingered in the room. "We've come this far. There's no turning back. We have to know what's out there." Dr. Fisher nodded. "All right, then we move forward. We send the message again, but this time we don't just wait. We prepare. We've crossed into the unknown, and we have to be ready for whatever that means." With a sense of resolve settling over the group, Dr. Fisher initiated the next phase of communication. As she pressed the button, she couldn't help but wonder what would come next. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was the only road they could take. The moment the signal left their hands, the team collectively held their breath. The weight of their decision hung heavy in the air as they waited for the response, unsure of what would come next. They had crossed a threshold, stepping into the unknown, with no guarantee of what awaited them on the other side. The room was thick with tension, the soft hum of the machinery the only sound, a reminder of the enormity of their actions. Fisher paced the length of the control room, her mind racing through the possible outcomes. They'd already sent a message back, reaching out to a presence beyond their universe, beyond anything they had known. What if their message was misinterpreted? What if they were making a mistake? "Do you think they understand what we sent?" Julia asked, breaking the silence. Her voice was quiet, but the anxiety was clear. "We can only hope," Dr. Fisher replied, her gaze fixed on the console, willing it to respond. "We've sent everything we could, a clear, simple signal. But whether or not it reaches them the way we intend, we can't predict." The uncertainty of the situation pressed down on the team. What if they were drawing attention from something far beyond their understanding? The implications were as terrifying as they were awe-inspiring. To think they might be communicating with an intelligence from another dimension, another universe altogether. It was almost too much to comprehend. "I still can't believe we're here," Daniel said, his voice distant, as though he were speaking to himself. "I mean, this is bigger than anything any of us signed up for." Suddenly, the console flickered. A new signal, faint at first, appeared on the screen. It was unlike anything they had seen before. There was no immediate pattern, no familiar structure to latch onto. But it was there, a response. Something was happening. "Is this it?" Paul's voice trembled as he leaned forward, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Are they answering?" Dr. Fisher stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. The new signal seemed to pulse, almost alive, and it wasn't just a message. It was a call. The kind of message that wasn't meant to be understood instantly, but felt deeply, in a way that resonated through the very core of their beings. As Dr. Fisher analyzed the data, she realized something startling. This wasn't just a response to their message. It was an invitation, a challenge to engage on a level they had never before considered. The weight of the unknown hung heavy on them now. The threshold had been crossed, and there was no way back. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The journey into the unknown had only just begun. The room was unnervingly quiet, filled with an intense stillness that seemed to cling to the air. The team stood around the console, mesmerized by the screen as the response from beyond their universe continued to unfold. What had started as a cryptic series of symbols now formed a clear, intricate pattern, pulsing with an energy that felt alive. It wasn't just a message anymore. It was something that connected them to a reality they couldn't yet fully comprehend. Dr. Fisher hovered at the console, her fingers poised above the keyboard, uncertain, but knowing that the next step would be pivotal. The room was thick with tension as the team exchanged silent glances, each person grappling with the weight of what they were witnessing. The discovery was no longer a mere curiosity. It was a force, one that was beyond anything they had imagined. "This isn't just a message," Dr. Fisher said softly, her voice barely audible. "It's something alive, something aware of us." Julia, who had been standing nearby, took a step closer to the screen. "What do we do now? We've opened something, but what if this is more than we can handle?" Her voice quivered, filled with awe and concern. Dr. Fisher took a deep breath, her mind racing with questions. "We keep going," she said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in her chest. "We can't turn back. We've already made contact with something beyond our understanding. The question is, where do we go from here?" As they continued watching, the symbols on the screen shifted, transforming into something new, something more. Images of distant stars, galaxies, and strange landscapes began to emerge. These weren't just random patterns. They were coherent, structured images that felt deeply alien, yet beautiful. The very fabric of their reality seemed to be bending before them. Daniels, who had been pacing at the back of the room, stopped and turned to Dr. Fisher. "What exactly are we seeing here? This could be a message or it could be a warning. How do we know what it means?" Dr. Fisher paused, the weight of his words hanging in the air. "We don't," she admitted, her eyes not leaving the screen. "But we can't ignore it. This message, this is more than we ever expected. We have to face it." The screen flickered again, the symbols rearranging themselves with a sudden burst of energy. The room seemed to vibrate with the shift, and the team felt it in their bones. The atmosphere, once tense with fear, now pulsed with curiosity. The room had transformed into a bridge between two worlds, one that humanity knew, and one that lay beyond their comprehension. "It's not just about us anymore," Julia whispered, her voice full of awe. "We're not talking to aliens. We're talking to something so much more. We've been given a glimpse into a new reality. What do we do with it?" The question hung in the air, unspoken but understood by everyone. They had opened a door to something they couldn't fully grasp. The only question now was whether to step through and explore what lay beyond, or to walk away and remain in the safety of the familiar. "We move forward," Dr. Fisher said, her voice firm, resolute. "We don't know what lies ahead, but we have to see this through. We're part of history now. It's time to take the next step." With a collective breath, the team gathered around the console. The unknown no longer felt like something to fear. It was a chance, an opportunity to transcend their limits. The journey into the vast unknown had just begun. The tension in the room was almost suffocating. The team stood before the console, their eyes fixed on the screen, the message now pulsing with an intensity that resonated deep within them. The symbols had evolved into something entirely new, an unmistakable invitation. The energy in the room was palpable. Each person could feel the weight of what was at stake. Dr. Fisher stood at the forefront, her eyes narrowed in concentration. The team had just crossed a threshold. The message, a living entity of its own, was no longer a distant force. It had become part of them. She could feel it in her bones, the gravity of the decision they now faced. "We've seen enough," she said, her voice low but full of determination. "We've made contact, and now we have to take the next step. We're no longer just receivers. We've become part of the conversation." Julia, still processing the magnitude of what had transpired, took a tentative step forward. "But what if this is all too much? What if we're not ready for whatever's coming next?" Dr. Fisher glanced at her, her gaze steady. "We won't know unless we move forward. We can't sit back and wait. The universe has sent us an invitation. This could change everything. We owe it to ourselves and to humanity to answer it." The room fell silent, each person contemplating the unknown they were about to confront. They had crossed into a realm where the laws of physics were not entirely understood, where every piece of knowledge they had was upended by the evolving message on the screen. Daniels, who had been standing by the back wall, finally spoke. "What if we're opening Pandora's box? What if something comes through? Something we can't control?" His voice was heavy with the weight of the question, a question that mirrored the collective fear that had gripped them all. The unknown was terrifying, especially when the stakes were as high as they were now. But there was no turning back. They had already made contact, and the decision to step away was no longer an option. "We can't let fear hold us back," Dr. Fisher replied firmly, her eyes fixed on the screen. "This could be humanity's greatest opportunity. We can't back out now. Not when we've come this far." The team exchanged uneasy glances, each of them silently weighing the risks against the potential rewards. The message had already begun to shape their reality. The energy in the room, the pulsating symbols, they were all guiding them towards something beyond their comprehension. "I say we take the next step," Dr. Fisher continued. "We respond. We move forward." The words echoed through the room, and for a moment there was silence. The team seemed frozen in place, as if waiting for something, or perhaps someone, to give them a reason to hesitate. But as they stared at the screen, each of them knew what had to be done. Julia nodded, her expression a mix of determination and awe. "Let's do it," she said quietly. "Let's take the leap." And with that, the decision was made. They had chosen to answer the message, to embrace the unknown and take the first step into whatever lay beyond. The future was uncertain, but they were ready. Together, they would face whatever came next, no matter how extraordinary, no matter how dangerous. The countdown had begun. The message had been received, and humanity was about to answer. The room was electric with anticipation. The decision had been made. The team was about to respond to the unknown, no longer just passive observers, but active participants in an unfolding mystery far beyond the human experience. The screens were flickering with the symbols, now pulsing in synchronization with the team's collective heartbeat. There was no turning back now. Whatever they did next would change the course of history forever. Dr. Fisher stood at the helm, her fingers hovering over the console. The message they had received was no longer just a signal. It was a living presence. Every symbol, every pulse of light felt like it was alive, communicating not only information, but a deeper, more intimate connection. She glanced around at her team, her colleagues who had now become something more than just fellow scientists. They had evolved together in this moment, sharing a common purpose. "We're about to step into the unknown," Dr. Fisher said, her voice calm but laced with the weight of the decision. "But we do it together. No matter what happens, we face it as one." Julia stepped forward, her face set with resolve. "We knew this day would come, but I didn't think it would happen like this. It's beyond anything we could have imagined." The room fell silent as the team stood poised for action. Dr. Fisher pressed a button on the console, sending a pulse of energy into the message. The symbols on the screen shifted, aligning themselves into a new pattern. For the first time, the message was speaking back, the response evolving in real time. "It's starting," Dr. Fisher murmured, her heart racing. The team gathered around, watching as the message unfolded. There was no way to know exactly what would come next, but they could feel it, a sense of purpose that transcended anything they had ever felt before. Daniels, still uneasy, couldn't help but speak up. "What if we're opening a door that shouldn't be opened? What if what's on the other side is something we can't handle?" Dr. Fisher's gaze softened, but her voice remained resolute. "There's always uncertainty when we explore the unknown. But we can't live in fear. We've already crossed a threshold. Now we need to see it through." As the symbols continued to evolve, the room began to vibrate with a subtle hum, the energy increasing in intensity. The walls felt as though they were stretching, bending. It was as though the very fabric of reality was shifting around them. For a brief moment, everything seemed to freeze. The air was thick with the pressure of what was about to happen. Then the screen flickered once more, and the message that had started as an incomprehensible signal had transformed into something human. "We've made contact," Julia whispered, her voice barely audible. She took a step back, overwhelmed by the realization. Dr. Fisher nodded slowly. "This is it. This is the beginning." The unknown had opened its door. They had crossed the threshold, and now there was no turning back. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The universe, once vast and incomprehensible, now felt closer than ever. The future was no longer a mystery. It was theirs to shape. The countdown had begun, but this time it wasn't just the spacecraft that was heading toward the unknown. They were too, and this time, humanity would be answering. The tension in the room was palpable as the symbols on the screen continued to pulse and shift. Every second that passed felt like an eternity. The energy in the air had become almost tangible, a force that seemed to echo through the walls and reverberate deep within their bones. They had made contact. But now the real challenge was just beginning. What had they unlocked? What was this force that had responded to them? And more importantly, what would it do next? Dr. Fisher stood at the console, her eyes locked on the screen, watching the symbols morph and change in front of her. She could feel it, the presence behind the message, a consciousness that had reached across the cosmos and was now looking directly at them. It was no longer an abstract concept. It was alive, aware, and waiting for them to understand. "This is more than just a message," Dr. Fisher whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the equipment. "It's a force. It's awakening." The room went silent as the rest of the team absorbed her words. They had all felt it, the shift in the atmosphere, the change in the very fabric of space itself. This wasn't just a signal from another civilization. It was a force that had been waiting for this moment, for them. But what was it? And why had it chosen to make contact now? "We've opened something, but now what?" Julia's voice broke the silence. "What do we do with this?" Daniel stood beside her, his brow furrowed in thought. "We have no idea what this could mean. We're talking about a power that doesn't obey the laws of physics as we know them. Who knows what it's capable of?" Dr. Fisher turned to face them, her gaze steady. "We can't turn back now. We've made contact. Whatever this is, whatever it represents, we're connected to it now. And the universe, our universe, has just shifted. The message on the screen continued to evolve, and this time, the symbols seemed to form into shapes, as if something was trying to convey an image, a deeper understanding. It was as though the energy itself was reaching out to them, speaking to them on a level beyond mere comprehension. It wasn't about words or symbols anymore. It was about feeling, about understanding at a core level. And what they felt, what they were beginning to understand, was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. "This is beyond us," Daniel said, his voice tinged with fear. "This isn't something we were meant to encounter. What if it's too much? What if we've unleashed something we can't control?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. But Dr. Fisher knew one thing for certain: they couldn't turn away. This was the moment that defined everything. Humanity's first true contact with an entity beyond their understanding. The universe had always been a mystery, an endless sea of unknowns. But now, it was no longer unknown. It was here. And whatever this force was, it was waiting for them to make the next move. "We don't have a choice," Dr. Fisher said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "This is it. The unknown is no longer a question. It's our reality now." The team stood frozen, unable to look away from the screen. Whatever happened next would change everything. The awakening force was no longer a mystery. It was a living, breathing presence, and it was waiting for them to act. The room seemed to shrink around them as the symbols on the screen continued to shift in form. The air felt thick with a presence they couldn't fully understand, yet one that seemed undeniably real. The team had been watching in awe as the message from the other universe had evolved into something far beyond their expectations. It was no longer just a signal. It was a conversation, a living, breathing entity reaching out to them in ways that no human language could ever express. Dr. Fisher's hand hovered over the console, her fingers trembling as she tried to process the enormity of what was unfolding. The tension in the room was palpable, each person in the team feeling the weight of the moment. They had crossed a threshold, and now they were standing at the precipice of something they couldn't fully comprehend. I think I understand," Dr. Fisher said slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't just an invitation, it's a revelation. They're showing us something, a glimpse into a reality far beyond our own." The room fell silent, each member of the team processing her words. The message was not just alien. It was a revelation of the universe itself. The symbols, now fully formed, were more than just abstract patterns. They were representations of concepts, ideas, and dimensions that defied human understanding. The more they stared at them, the more they realized they weren't just observing an extraterrestrial intelligence. They were becoming part of it. This is too much," Julia whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. "We're seeing things, realities that we were never meant to see. We can't look away," Dr. Fisher replied, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts racing through her mind. "Whatever this is, whatever we're seeing, it's a gift, a chance to understand something much greater than ourselves." Daniel stood at the back of the room, his arms crossed over his chest. "But what if we're not ready?" he asked, the unease evident in his voice. "What if we're stepping into something that's beyond our control? What if this isn't a gift, but a warning?" His words hung in the air, unspoken fear shared by everyone in the room. But Dr. Fisher knew that there was no turning back. They had opened the door, and there was no way to close it. The universe had chosen them for this moment, and whether they were ready or not, They had to face it. Whatever happens next, Dr. Fisher said, her voice now filled with resolve. We face it together. This is the next step for humanity. We've been shown a new path, a path that no one could have imagined. As the symbols on the screen began to shift once again, the room seemed to pulse with energy. It was as if the very air was charged, vibrating with the force of what they had uncovered. They were no longer just observers. They were participants in something far greater. The message from the other universe was not just information. It was a connection, a bond that was being formed between them and something far beyond human comprehension. The unknown had become their reality. The question now was no longer if they were ready. It was whether they could rise to meet the challenge ahead. The universe had spoken, and they were about to respond. The revelation was only just beginning. The atmosphere in the room was dense with anticipation as the team sat in silence, staring at the screen. The message from the other universe had now evolved into something undeniable, something far greater than any of them had ever imagined. The symbols continued to shift and change, becoming more complex with each passing second. But now, there was a sense of finality in the air. They had reached a crossroads, a point where the next step would define everything. Dr. Fisher stood at the center of the room, her hands still hovering over the console, but her mind was miles away. The enormity of the situation had sunk in, and for the first time, she allowed herself to fully process what had just happened. The message wasn't just an invitation or a warning. It was a challenge. It was a call to action. We've crossed into unknown territory. Dr. Fisher finally spoke, her voice steady but heavy with emotion. The universe has reached out to us, and now we have to decide how to respond. Julia stepped forward, her expression uncertain. But how do we respond to something like this? What if we're not ready for what comes next? We've opened a door, but we don't know what's on the other side. I don't think we'll ever be ready, Dr. Fisher replied quietly. But we can't let fear stop us from moving forward. This is our chance to understand the universe in ways we never thought possible. We've been given a glimpse of something beyond our comprehension, but it's up to us to take that next step. Daniels was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the shifting symbols on the screen. What if it's too much for us? He asked, his voice barely audible. What if humanity can't handle what we've learned? What if we're opening a door that should have stayed closed? The silence in the room grew heavier as the weight of his words settled over the team. The unknown was daunting, and the fear of the consequences was palpable. The message they had received was so far beyond anything they had imagined that it was impossible to fully grasp the implications. Were they opening a door to discovery or to something far darker? Dr. Fisher exhaled slowly, gathering her thoughts. We can't let fear dictate our choices. The unknown is always going to be intimidating, but we can't turn away now. We've come too far. We have to move forward, together. Julia nodded slowly, her voice trembling slightly. But how? How do we move forward? What do we even do with all of this? The first step is to understand, Dr. Fisher said. We have to study the message. We have to learn from it, decipher it, and find a way to communicate with whatever is reaching out to us. Only then can we begin to understand the next step. The team stood together in silence, the weight of their decision clear in the air. They had crossed a threshold, and there was no turning back. The universe had shown them a path, but the road ahead was unknown. We're not alone, Dr. Fisher said softly, almost to herself. This is only the beginning. The room was still. The The team had made their choice. They would move forward into the unknown, driven by the need to understand, to explore, and to answer the call from beyond the stars. What awaited them was uncertain, but they were ready to face it. The next chapter was about to begin.